They brought her into the courtroom in handcuffs, a woman, a warrior, and the first black female Navy SEAL sniper in U.S. history, accused of disobeying orders. She stood silently as the world judged her. But when a 4-star Admiral walked in unannounced, holding a sealed envelope and a storm in his eyes, everything changed. What followed wasn't just a trial, it was a battle for truth, honor, and the soul of a broken system. The courtroom was cold and silent. People sat in neat rows, waiting for something serious to happen. The wooden benches were filled with Navy officers, military police, journalists, and a few family members. Cameras were not allowed, but that didn't stop the whispers, the stares, or the tension that seemed to float in the air. Everyone was waiting. The judge had not entered yet, so the lawyers were shuffling their papers. It felt like the air itself was holding its breath. Then, the door at the back of the courtroom opened with a loud creak. 2 military police officers walked in, followed by someone in handcuffs. She was a tall black woman in full Navy dress uniform. Her back was straight, her eyes focused, and her hands were tightly locked together with steel cuffs. Some people gasped quietly, others looked confused. A few stared in disbelief. It was Petty Officer First Class Danielle Graves, the first black female Navy SEAL sniper in U.S. military history. She was not just a soldier, she was a legend. Stories about her had spread through the Navy for years. She was known for being calm under pressure, deadly accurate with her sniper rifle, and fearless in the most dangerous places on Earth. She had saved lives, completed missions others wouldn't dare to attempt, and even been awarded the Medal of Valor. Her name was known in the highest circles of military command. And now, she was standing in a courtroom with chains on her wrists. Some people couldn't believe it. A few junior officers in the room looked up to her like a hero. They had posters of her. They had memorized her mission records. Now, those same officers watched as she was made to sit down like a criminal, still in handcuffs. The guards on either side of her didn't say a word. She didn't look at anyone. She kept her face calm, her eyes straight ahead. But something about the way she sat tall, still unshaken, made people feel uneasy. Didn't look like someone who had done something wrong. She looked like someone who was waiting. Whispers ran through the courtroom. Why is she here? She saved that reporter in Syria, right? I heard she disobeyed orders. Can you believe they put handcuffs on her? The defense lawyer, a young Navy lieutenant, sat next to Danielle. He looked nervous. His papers were shaking slightly in his hands. Across from him, the military prosecutor, an older man with a cold face, prepared his opening arguments. He looked at Danielle like she was just another case to win. Not a hero, not a soldier. Just another name on a file. When the judge finally entered, everyone stood. The room became even more serious. The judge was a stern man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had served in the Navy himself and had seen many cases, but even he looked surprised when he saw Danielle in chains. For a moment he hesitated, then nodded to the guards. "Please remove the handcuffs," he said. But the prosecutor quickly stood up. "Objection, Your Honor. Due to the nature of the charges and the security level of the accused, we ask that the restraints remain in place." The judge frowned. "She's a decorated SEAL, not a flight risk." Nevertheless, the prosecutor insisted, "This court is under orders." The judge looked directly at Danielle. She remained calm. Not a single muscle moved in her face. It was like she had trained her body to stay still no matter what, on the battlefield or in a courtroom. After a pause, the judge sighed and allowed the handcuffs to remain. That moment said everything. Danielle Graves, once a symbol of courage and excellence, was now being treated like a danger to her own country. The prosecutor began his case. He spoke in a strong, clear voice, listing the charges: failure to follow direct orders, endangering her unit, unauthorized use of classified intelligence during a mission in Syria. As he spoke, he described Danielle's decision to break from her command chain, lead an unsanctioned route through a Kurdish convoy, and risk American lives in enemy territory. But to the people who knew the real story, the prosecutor's words felt hollow, because the truth was more complicated. Danielle's mission in Syria had saved a captured American journalist from execution. The original plan had failed. Their extraction helicopter was compromised by a leak. She had made a quick decision, using local Kurdish allies to create an escape route through a dangerous area. The result? The hostage lived. Her team survived. No American soldier died. Yet here she was, on trial for doing what she believed was right. The prosecutor didn't mention that. He only said she broke protocol. She ignored command. She endangered national security. Danielle listened without blinking. Her defense attorney sat silently. He had been warned, pushed too hard, and his career would be over. Too many of the mission's details were classified. He wasn't even allowed to present full evidence in the back row of the courtroom. The young SEAL whispered to his teammate, "This is wrong. Everyone knows she did the right thing." The teammate whispered back, "Yeah, but someone high-ups," making her the fall guy. Danielle didn't turn her head, but she had probably heard them. Her senses were sharp. She was trained to hear everything. Every step, every breath, every whisper. After the prosecutor finished, the judge called a break. People left their seats and filed into the hallway, whispering again. No one had expected it to go this way. No one had expected a courtroom drama around a war hero. Outside, a journalist named Sarah Ford scribbled in her notebook. She had been covering military cases for 10 years, but this one felt different. She had interviewed soldiers who had served. With Danielle, they all said the same thing. She was the best of them. She saved lives. She didn't play politics. And maybe that was the problem. Back inside, Danielle remained seated. Still in handcuffs? Her lawyer offered her a glass of water. She took it with both hands, wrists bound, and sipped quietly. Her eyes still didn't show emotion, but her hands were slightly trembling. Not from fear, but from being held back. From not being allowed to speak freely. From knowing that her story was being told by others who didn't know the truth. And still, she said nothing. When the court session resumed, the defense lawyer gave a short, quiet statement. He tried to explain that Danielle had saved lives, not endangered them. He reminded the court that real missions in war zones often require real-time decisions. He hinted that the full details couldn't be shared due to security clearance, but assured the court that she had acted with honor and skill. But the judge looked trapped. The prosecution looked satisfied, and Danielle just sat there, like a warrior in a cage. Then something strange happened. The courtroom doors opened again, this time not loud, but with quiet authority. Everyone turned. A man in a dark navy uniform stepped in. His presence made people stand. Some gasped. Others whispered his name. It was a 4-star Admiral. No one had expected him to come. And in that moment, the entire courtroom froze. But that is a story for another part. For now, the image remained. A proud, brilliant, fearless woman in handcuffs, surrounded by silence, false charges, and fear, but still holding herself. Like a soldier, like a sniper who never missed, and like a truth that could not be silenced forever. Long before she stood handcuffed in that cold courtroom, Danielle Graves was just a little girl running barefoot in the cracked sidewalks of East Detroit. Her neighborhood was one of the roughest in the city. Abandoned buildings, broken windows. Police sirens and loud arguments were part of daily life. But inside a small 2-bedroom house on the corner of the street, there was something else. Discipline, love, and a quiet kind of hope. Danielle was raised by her mother, Lorraine Graves, a nurse who worked double and sometimes triple shifts to support her family. Danielle's father, Sergeant Malcolm Graves, had been a Marine. He died in Iraq when Danielle was only 6 years old. She remembered the day the officers came to their door in their pressed uniforms. She remembered her mother's scream, and how she hugged Danielle and her baby brother so tight that they couldn't breathe. From that day, something changed in Danielle. She didn't cry much. She didn't complain. She watched her mother take control of the house and raise them like a soldier with courage, rules, and love. Danielle was smart in school, but always quiet. Teachers said she was focused beyond her years. She didn't have many friends. While other girls her age played with dolls or dreamed about dances and dresses, Danielle spent hours reading books about the military, war, and survival. She wanted to know everything about what her father had done. She read about strategy, snipers, and special forces. And deep inside her, a fire started to grow. She didn't just want to understand her father's world. She wanted to become a part of it. By the time she was 17, Danielle had made up her mind. She went to a Navy recruiter's office by herself and signed up. Her mother didn't stop her, even though it scared her deeply. She simply looked Danielle in the eyes and said, "If you're going to do it better than anyone ever has." Those words stayed with Danielle forever. Boot camp wasn't easy. From day one, she was tested, pushed, and sometimes humiliated. Some people doubted her, some mocked her, and some were just confused. She was a 5'9" black girl from the inner city in a world full of tough-talking men from small towns and military families. She didn't fit the image of what a Navy recruit was supposed to be. But Danielle didn't talk back. She worked harder. She ran faster. She memorized instructions, practiced hand-to-hand combat at night, and kept pushing through the pain and exhaustion. Then came the biggest challenge of all, SEAL training. The Navy SEALs were the most elite warriors in the U.S. military. The training was brutal. Most people didn't make it. Hell Week alone broke most recruits. It was 5 days of almost no sleep, freezing water drills, sandbag carries, drown-proofing, obstacle courses, and mental games designed to make even the strongest quit. Out of 140 men in her group, only 18 made it through. Danielle was the only woman. And she didn't just survive, she finished in the top 5. Her teammates started calling her Ghost. Not just because she moved like one, silent, quick, deadly, but because she never showed emotion. She didn't smile much, didn't complain, didn't brag. She was always calm, even when things got bad. One instructor said, "That girl's got sniper eyes, cold and clear." After completing SEAL qualification, Danielle went into sniper school. It was one of the hardest schools in the military. It wasn't just about hitting targets from long distances. It was about calculating wind, light, terrain, even the Earth's rotation. It was about staying still in one spot for 36 hours without moving. It was about hiding in plain sight, about shooting only when it mattered most. She passed with top marks. No one could argue she was one of the best. Even after she became a SEAL sniper, the road wasn't smooth. Every mission she was on came with two kinds of pressure. One was the mission itself: find the target, protect the team, and complete the objective. The other was invisible, but heavier: the pressure of being the only black woman in rooms full of powerful men who didn't know whether to fear her, admire her, or try to get rid of her. Some officers didn't want her on their team. Others tried to test her, embarrass her, or blame her when things went wrong. Few simply watched from the shadows, waiting for her to fail. But her teammates, the ones who bled and fought beside her, respected her. They trusted her. When they were in the field, they didn't see color or gender. They saw Ghost, and Ghost had never let them down. She didn't talk much about the missions she completed. Most of them were classified. But the ones that made the news told enough of the story. In Afghanistan, she stayed hidden in a mountain for 19 hours, protecting a convoy from Taliban fighters below. She killed 6 targets from over 800 yards away, all with one rifle. In one session, in Nigeria, she rescued 2 kidnapped aid workers by crawling through a jungle for 3 kilometers in total silence. She reached the tent, neutralized 2 guards. Spheric standing in Syria, the mission that changed her life forever. She saved the life of an American journalist who was going to be executed by extremists. Gone wrong? The helicopter extraction failed. The enemy knew they were coming. Danielle had to make a decision. She found a Kurdish convoy nearby and convinced them to help with the escape. Her team got out, wounded but alive. The hostage lived. But instead of getting a thank you, Danielle got a summons for questioning. That was the beginning of the trial. Even before that mission, Danielle had started to feel the weight of being a symbol. Reporters wanted to interview her. The Navy wanted to feature her in magazines and speeches. But she refused most of it. She didn't become a SEAL to be on posters. She became one because she believed in doing the job. Still, the attention followed her. Some of her fellow SEALs loved her for it. Others resented it. Over time, small things began to add up. She would be excluded from briefings. Her reports would be delayed. But when she requested new equipment, it arrived late or not at all. When she filed complaints about discrimination, they were reviewed but never resolved. A quiet war had started against her, not on the battlefield but inside the system. She kept going, not for medals, not for promotions, but for the people on the ground who needed her, for her teammates who trusted her, and maybe also for her father, whose memory followed her in every mission. Every shot, every night, she lay still under the stars. She still carried his old Marine dog tags with her, tied to a string in her boot. They were worn and scratched, but they reminded her who she was and why she was doing all of this. People around her noticed that she had changed over the years. She laughed less, slept less, and started reading more books about military history, politics, and the cost of silence. She didn't just want to be a weapon anymore. She wanted to understand the machine that used weapons. When the Syria mission happened, it felt like the final test. Everything she had trained for, everything she had learned, came down to that moment when she had to choose: follow orders blindly, or follow her gut and save a life. She chose the second, and now she was paying the price for it. But even as she sat in court, people had no idea what it had taken for her to get there. Not just the physical pain, the broken ribs, the sleepless nights, the gunfire near her ears, but the mental pain, the loneliness, the heavy responsibility of being the first, the only, and the target. She had carved a path through concrete and fire. She had broken walls and rules. But instead of applause, they had put her in handcuffs, and yet she didn't break. Not in training, not in war, not in court, because she wasn't fighting for medals or permission. She was fighting to exist in a space where no one like her had ever been allowed to stand before. And even though they tried to silence her, the truth was still out there, waiting to be heard. The day of the mission in Syria had arrived. Danielle Graves and her team were prepared for a dangerous operation to rescue an American journalist held captive by a violent militant group. The plan was straightforward in theory: infiltrate the area, provide sniper cover, help the assault team reach the hostage, and extract him safely. But as any soldier knows, the battlefield is unpredictable and full of surprises. Danielle understood this better than most. Their journey began under the cover of darkness. They parachuted silently into a rough zone controlled by hostile forces. The night was cold and quiet, but the tension was thick like fog. Every sound seemed amplified: footsteps in rubble, whispered commands, distant gunshots. Danielle led the team with steady determination, scanning the terrain for threats and constantly reassessing their route. They knew the enemy could appear at any moment. Reaching their designated rooftop took hours of careful movement through the ruins of bombed-out buildings and empty streets. The early morning lights slowly began to paint the sky in soft hues of pink and orange. From their vantage point, Danielle peered through her sniper scope and found the compound where the journalist was held. He looked weak, beaten, and scared, tied up and surrounded by armed guards. But the situation was worse than intelligence had suggested. There were more guards than expected, heavy weapons being unloaded from a truck, and signs the enemy was preparing to execute their prisoners soon. Time was running out. Danielle contacted her command with the new information, alerting them to the unexpected danger. They ordered a temporary hold as the situation was reassessed. Suddenly, a chilling message came through the radio. The helicopter scheduled to extract the team had been compromised. The pilot was captured, and the enemy knew the rescue was underway. The official order was to abort the mission immediately and retreat. Danielle's mind raced. The order was clear, but so was the reality in front of her. The hostage was about to be killed. Waiting or retreating meant certain death for him. Taking action meant risking everything. She chose action. She told her team to prepare to breach the compound and engage the enemy. Her voice was calm but firm. Her team trusted her instincts because they had witnessed her leadership in countless difficult moments before. Without hesitation, Danielle fired the first shot, taking down the guard about to harm the hostage. erupted as her team stormed the building in the fierce firefight that followed. Her team rescued the journalist, but not without injuries. One teammate was shot in the leg, another wounded by shrapnel. Despite the pain and confusion, Danielle remained focused. She coordinated the escape route and kept her eyes constantly scanning for threats. Without the helicopter, they had to find another way out. Danielle remembered a Kurdish convoy they had seen earlier during their approach, a group of local fighters who might be willing to help. Reaching out to local allies was risky, but it was their only option. Approaching the convoy was tense. Guns were pointed at them initially. But Danielle's calm confidence and clear communication persuaded the Kurdish fighters to assist. She explained the situation and the urgency. Recognizing the humanity in her, they agreed to help. They loaded wounded teammates and the rescued journalists into the convoys, trucks, and raced across difficult terrain toward the border. Throughout the journey, Danielle stayed alert, her sniper rifle ready. She tended to Ethan Ward, the journalist, doing her best to keep him conscious and stable. Crossing the border, they handed the rescued captive over to American forces, who quickly moved him to safety. Danielle and her team were finally out of immediate danger. However, the victory was bittersweet. Instead of receiving praise, Danielle was met with suspicion and silence. The Navy command questioned her decision to disobey direct orders to abort. She was accused of reckless conduct that endangered national security. The very institution she had devoted her life to now turned its back on her. Danielle stood firm. She defended her choice, arguing that the original plan was compromised and that saving a life was her top priority. She insisted her actions were necessary and justified. Yet she was silenced and isolated, removed from active duty and barred from communicating with her teammates. Over the following weeks, strange things happened. Critical evidence, including her sniper scope footage and mission reports, mysteriously disappeared. Communications to her superiors went unanswered. Her team was scattered, preventing them from supporting her story. The Kurdish convoy's involvement was ignored. The truth was being buried. Danielle realized she was being made a scapegoat to protect higher-ups from blame. Her courage and quick thinking, which had saved lives, were being punished to maintain an image of control and order. Facing a court-martial, Danielle was handcuffed in front of her fellow officers. The humiliation was deep, but so was her resolve. She was not just fighting for herself, but for the truth, for the values she had sworn to uphold. That night, before the trial, she reflected on everything she had endured: the rigorous training, the combat missions, the sacrifices, and the betrayal. She reminded herself that being a true soldier meant more than following orders blindly. It meant making the hard choices that protect innocent lives, even when it costs everything. The courtroom was tense. Eyes watched her from every corner. The handcuffs felt heavy, but Danielle stood tall. She wasn't just a defendant. She was a warrior fighting against an injustice greater than any enemy she had faced in battle. She believed that the truth would eventually come out, that the courage she showed in the darkest moments would inspire others to stand up, that the story of a black female SEAL sniper who had risked everything to save a life would not be erased. Even when the world seemed to turn against her, Danielle Graves held on to her identity as a protector, a leader, and a fighter, the first of her kind in many ways, but determined not to be the last. After Danielle Graves was handcuffed and faced with the court-martial, the atmosphere around her changed dramatically. The courtroom was filled with tension, silence, and eyes that watched her every move. This was no longer a battlefield of gunfire and shadows, but a battlefield of words, accusations, and power. What Danielle was about to face was something she had never prepared for. A fight for her honor and career in a place where truth was not always what mattered. She sat quietly, her hands bound, surrounded by officers who once respected her, but now looked at her with a mixture of disbelief and suspicion. The weight of the situation pressed on her, but she stayed calm inside. She remembered her training, her years of discipline, and the countless missions where her decisions saved lives. Now, she had to defend the most important mission of all, her own story. The prosecution began by laying out the charges: disobedience of direct orders, reckless endangerment of national security, and conduct unbecoming of a Navy SEAL. They said she had acted independently without approval, risking not only the mission but the safety of the entire team and sensitive intelligence. They painted a picture of a soldier who had lost control and jeopardized everything. Danielle listened carefully. She knew their version was far from the truth, but the courtroom was a place of persuasion. Facts could be twisted. Stories could be spun. She knew her task was not just to tell the truth, but to make the truth impossible to ignore. When her turn came, Danielle spoke with quiet strength. She explained how the original plan had been compromised. The helicopter was captured. The extraction was impossible, and the enemy was ready to kill the hostage at any moment. Waiting or retreating would have meant certain death for Ethan Ward. She described the split-second decisions she made, the risks she took, and the lives she saved. She recounted how she led the team through hostile territory, how she negotiated with the Kurdish convoy for help, and how every choice was made with the mission's success and the team's safety in mind. Her words painted a vivid picture of bravery, leadership, and sacrifice. But the courtroom was not interested in the heroism. It was focused on rules, regulations, and the chain of command. The defense's arguments were met with skepticism, and many officers seemed unwilling to believe that a woman, especially a black female SEAL sniper, could have led such a dangerous and successful mission on her own terms. Danielle realized this was about more than just the mission. It was about prejudice, about challenging the traditional image of a Navy SEAL. About breaking barriers in an institution slow to change. She was not just fighting for her freedom. She was fighting for recognition, respect, and equality. During the trial, witnesses were called. Some teammates came forward to support her, recounting the dangerous conditions and her decisive leadership. They spoke of the trust they had in her and the lives she saved. But others, possibly under pressure or fear of reprisal, remained silent, or gave lukewarm testimonies. The prosecution also introduced classified information they claimed was compromised during the mission. Some of this evidence was vague or incomplete, raising questions about whether it was used fairly in the trial or as a tool to build a case against Danielle. Throughout it all, Danielle's resolve did not waver. She spent sleepless nights preparing her defense, studying military law, and consulting with attorneys who believed in her cause. She knew the stakes were high. A conviction could end her career and her reputation. But she also knew that telling the truth was the only way to maintain her integrity. Outside the courtroom, the story began to attract attention. A few journalists caught wind of the unusual trial of a black female Navy SEAL accused of insubordination. Some began to dig deeper, interviewing her teammates and uncovering the truth behind the mission. Slowly, whispers of support and outrage started to spread, creating a ripple effect in military and civilian communities. Danielle's family and friends stood by her. They knew the sacrifice she had made and the injustice she faced. They became her strength when the world seemed determined to break her. Their letters, visits, and unwavering belief reminded her that she was not alone. As the trial progressed, a surprising moment changed everything. An admiral, a high-ranking officer with decades of experience and a reputation for fairness, entered the courtroom. His presence caused an immediate hush to fall over everyone. The admiral was known for his strict but just leadership and his support for diversity within the military. He asked to review the evidence himself, especially the missing footage and the communications that had been conveniently labeled as lost or classified. After a thorough investigation, the admiral uncovered discrepancies and cover-ups that had been hidden too. Protect certain individuals at higher levels. He confronted the officers responsible for the investigation and trial, demanding transparency and accountability. The courtroom atmosphere shifted again. It's time toward hope and justice. The admiral's intervention led to a reopening of the case. New evidence emerged, validating Danielle's version of events. Her bravery and leadership were finally acknowledged. The charges against her were dropped, and her record was cleared. But the victory was more than personal. Danielle's case became a symbol of courage and the fight against injustice in the military. It sparked conversations about race, gender, fairness in elite forces, and inspired reforms in how such cases were handled. Danielle Graves walked out of the courtroom not just as a cleared soldier, but as a trailblazer who had challenged a broken system and won. Her story became a beacon for others who faced similar battles in silence, even after the trial. Danielle continued to serve with honor, mentoring younger soldiers and advocating for change. She knew the path ahead was still difficult, but she faced it with the same strength and determination that had carried her through the darkest hours of her life. Her journey was far from over, but one thing was clear: Danielle Graves was no longer just a Navy SEAL sniper. She was a symbol of resilience, justice, and hope. The courtroom was heavy with silence as Danielle Graves awaited the final judgment. After months of turmoil, investigation, and an intense battle to clear her name, the moment had finally come. Every eye in the room was on her, yet Danielle remained composed. Years of training had taught her discipline, control, and the power of patience. She had faced enemies on distant battlefields, but this was a fight unlike any other, a fight for justice inside the very institution she had sworn to serve. The Admiral's unexpected entrance and intervention had shifted the tide in her favor. His reputation for integrity and fairness brought hope not only to Danielle, but to everyone watching the trial. The Admiral personally reviewed all the evidence, including the missing footage from Danielle's sniper scope and the communications about the compromised helicopter mission. What he found was troubling evidence had been deliberately hidden or altered to make Danielle appear guilty. With this discovery, the Admiral ordered a full review and called for the dismissal of all false accusations. He emphasized the importance of honesty, transparency, and honoring the sacrifices made by soldiers in the field. His words echoed through the courtroom, breaking the tension and igniting a sense of justice. Danielle listened as the charges against her were officially dropped. Relief flooded her body, but it was mixed with something deeper, a sense of vindication, and a quiet pride in having stood firm through adversity. The journey had been brutal, but she had proven her truth and integrity against overwhelming odds. After the court-martial ended, Danielle faced a new chapter. She was no longer just a soldier who had survived a harrowing mission. She was a symbol of courage and change. News outlets picked up her story, portraying her not as a troublemaker, but as a hero who had saved lives and stood up to injustice. Her experience sparked widespread conversations about race, gender, and fairness in the military, inspiring reforms and encouraging other women and minorities to pursue careers in special operations. Danielle didn't stop at clearing her name. She used her newfound platform to speak out about the challenges faced by women and people of color in elite military units. She advocated for better support systems, more inclusive policies, and fair treatment for all service members. She knew firsthand the obstacles that existed and wanted to help dismantle them for future generations. She also reconnected with her teammates who had stood by her during the mission and trial. Together, they worked on rebuilding trust and healing the wounds left by months of separation and uncertainty. Their bond, forged in battle and tested in court, was unbreakable. Training new recruits became one of Danielle's passions. She shared her story not only to inspire but to teach resilience, leadership, and integrity. Her classes were filled with young soldiers eager to learn from someone who had lived the realities of combat and courtroom battles alike. She became a mentor and a role model, proving that strength comes not only from physical skill, but from courage in the face of injustice. Danielle also remained deeply connected to the Kurdish allies who had helped during the mission. She worked on building bridges between local communities and military forces. Understanding that true security comes from cooperation and mutual respect. Her experience had shown her the importance of trust and alliances beyond borders. Despite her achievements, Danielle stayed humble. She knew that the fight for justice was ongoing and that many others still faced unfair treatment and discrimination. Her mission extended beyond herself. It was about creating a military where every soldier, regardless of background, could serve with dignity and respect. As she looked back on the journey, Danielle understood that her story was bigger than one mission or one trial. It was about breaking barriers, challenging stereotypes, and standing up for what is right, even when the odds are against you. She often thought about the moment the Admiral walked into the courtroom and how everything changed. It was a reminder that sometimes all it takes is one person willing to do what is right to make a difference. That moment gave her hope, and she vowed to be that person for others whenever she could. Danielle's future was filled with possibilities. She continued serving in the Navy, taking on leadership roles that allowed her to shape policies and mentor the next generation of soldiers. She also engaged in public speaking, sharing her experiences to inspire not only military personnel, but civilians as well. Her legacy was not just about the sniper shots or the missions she completed. It was about resilience, integrity, and the courage to stand tall when facing injustice. Danielle Graves became a beacon of hope, showing the world that true strength comes from standing up for what you believe in, no matter the cost. In the end, Danielle's story was a powerful reminder that heroes don't always wear medals or celebrate victories in public. Sometimes, heroes fight silent battles, battles in courtrooms, in boardrooms, and in the hearts of those who refuse to give up. Her journey taught many lessons about bravery, leadership, and the importance of justice. It showed that even in the darkest moments, standing firm in your truth can light the way for others. Danielle Graves had faced the impossible and emerged stronger. Her name would be remembered not just as a black female SEAL sniper, but as a trailblazer who changed the course of history by fighting for fairness and equality, and that was a victory far greater than any battlefield success.